Hello and welcome to the AMS Automotive Manufacturing Summit. Now, OEMs around the world are accelerating the launches of new products and powertrains, platforms and processes and factories, while at the same time meeting aggressive sustainability goals. And this is all at a time of huge volatility and disruption in both established and emerging markets. To get some expert insight into how manufacturers can harness the opportunities while avoiding the many pitfalls, I'm delighted to be joined by Mohan Savakar, Vice President and Product Line Head at Tata Motors, who oversees major product lines for the car makers' global production. Now, Mohan is responsible for product lines on ICE vehicles at Tata Motors across the A to C segment vehicles, including the Tiago, Tigor, Nexon, Altroz, Punch, Harrier and Safari. And he has oversight of cycle management, capacity and profitability, working closely in line with engineering operations, sales and marketing. So that's a lot of responsibilities, Mohan. You've got a very unique perspective, I think, on the operational side of things. So thank you very much for joining me. Yours is a role that, as we just said, that goes across R&D, engineering, production, supply chain, sales, and marketing. And with the high pace of launches at Tata, including the recent SUVs, like we just mentioned there, the new Safari, can you tell us a bit about how you work across all of these teams to ensure a reliable launch in that sort of instance?
Sure. So thank you, Nick, and pleasure and privilege to be here with AMS. So to start briefly, one has to first start with having a strong connect with customers and customer needs. Beyond that, there is a product plan that's vetted and course corrected annually for current products as well as the identified white spaces. Then, of course, we have a contemporary new product development process that is iterated quite often, a skilled and competent team, a governance mechanism that enables cooperation and cross-functional working across many verticals, as can be expected. And of course, appropriate focused based on the stage of the project, plus a little paranoia that helps. And the stage of the project could be right from concept to business focus to design, engineering, product development, vendor-based readiness, validation of the product, industrialization, adequate quality maturation before launch, adequate launch volumes. And by the way, these are only a few aspects.
I mean, even that shows the sort of scope of requirements with kind of vehicle launches and developments, and each stage is critical to the success of the following one and ultimately the produced vehicle. We're seeing an industry undergoing a lot of change in India and the markets that Tata does serve, and with these highly compressed model cycles, new technologies, and obviously, as we're seeing now, of course, rising costs, greater competition. What would you point to as the strategic changes or requirements that Tata needs to ensure that these new product lines are competitive?
Yeah, sure. This again is not a one-time exercise, and we have changed and morphed over a period of time, and the task is not yet over. We are still at it, and every year we go through a PDCA that tells us what needs to be done for the next year. Having said that, understanding Indian customers' needs, closely followed by India's operating conditions, are a good starting point. Then, of course, keeping tab on technology trends coupled with customer value of each of the features helps us select appropriate content. We have learned that bringing content before its time doesn't pay too. On the other hand, for example, popularity of the sunroof, which would otherwise be counterintuitive for a sunny country like India, has surprised us all. On the other hand, Indian auto industry has also shown ability to do things very speedily. For example, we just handled the leapfrogging of emission standards from BS4 to BS6 very seamlessly. Added to that, world-class front-end experience at the showrooms with focus on digital is another differentiator that everyone is working on. And shortening product development, as you call it, and go-to-market strategies have been an ongoing exercise. So thank you.
I mean, I just a couple of questions here. Do you see? I have a small experience of seeing manufacturing in India from a few years ago, and one of the key things that came away from me from a production point of view is that it is quite a. Would you say the Indian market is quite a unique one in the sense of the customer requirements? You did allude to it a little bit there, and I remember talking that the Indian manufacturers such as Tata are very, very well placed to cater for that market. They have a very quick turnaround, very good insight into customer demands and the ability to adapt very quickly for it. And you mentioned there things that were kind of slightly idiosyncratic in the sense of a sunroof, but things that customers want and seen and want to aspire to. And you have that competence and ability. But would you, looking now, and you're looking back over your long experience with this, would you see the sort of the way that the number of product launches and changes and the kind of update speed and cadence compared to how it used to be? Have you seen a dramatic increase in that, or has it remained relatively stable or manageable?
Yeah, for us, actually, we have been busier than ever on this front. Also supported by India's demographic dividend, which is on the rise. And by the way, so are expectations on refinement from our customers. Our recent strategy of new forever, coupled with identification of micro white spaces, has really seen us gain a healthy pull for our products. Launches in brand new product spaces are also more frequent than before, and equally, if not more, impactful. Our showroom today has many more nameplates than ever before. And of course, you would have seen our recent concept unveils that show the profusion of products that are underway from our side. So all in all, very busy times.
And keeping pace with that, the speed of it must be incredible. I mean, just looking at that, you've worked across supply chain manufacturing at various points in your career and have oversight still of what goes on. Do you note, you mentioned there, like the strategy is ongoing, progressing, developing. Do you note a difference today in how manufacturing capacity and processes are being planned in advance? Is there more focus now on engineering and designing a project for efficient manufacturability than perhaps in the past?
Yeah, sure. So today, of course, there is much more rigor to ensure manufacturability and efficiency right from concept stage, both for us as an OEM as well as our vendor partners. And by the way, vendor partners, both tier 1 and tier 2, are much more mature now, and several are capable of taking end-to-end development, something that we call FSS or full service suppliers. Things like getting design for manufacture feedback from die makers, BAW line builders, plastic tool makers is quite common. In fact, several times as design and engineering progresses through various stages. But so is getting technology vendors on board to get the intended design language with absolute fidelity. These days, software also plays a big role. And so that is also on top of a list to get the product right from the beginning. Items like electrical architecture and aggregates these days make a good percentage of the cost. And it's not so easy to change once a product hits the market. So one has to get them correct too. However, for capacities, one still does it cautiously, both for vendors and in-house, mainly because incurring fixed costs too early is kind of counterproductive. Their agility is the name of the game.
I mean, you mentioned there the need and obviously the developing transparency of the supply chain coming in and that greater partnership there.
Yep.
I mean, looking within your operations, how integrated are the design and engineering decisions with manufacturing capacity considerations? It used to be quite separated, but we are seeing that convergence of it. And
True.
is this having a big impact on your product launches, this kind of integration?
Yes, sure. I mean, if anything, it has made us work speedier and faster to get to market. And of course, these days, all product development has most of the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, in fact, from design to engineering to manufacturing to vendors working together. And by the way, not having cross-functional inputs and participation through the stage gate process that we follow is just not allowed. Having done this homework ensures quicker time to market and, of course, a smoother launch performance, as can be expected.
And looking at the model lineup now, Tata's expanding, as many manufacturers are, into more SUVs. They're a bigger, more complex vehicle in principle. Has this been a challenge to balance the requirements of sort of cost efficiency and frugality for the Indian market? Because it's a very tough market to be successful in, with the demand for quality and higher spec that these kind of vehicles now kind of come along with. And has that had an implication around the manufacturing side of things for you?
Yeah, sure. So getting the business equation right is always a tightrope walk. Applies to SUVs too. SUVs, by the way, have seen market growth very fast, and in India, we are now catching up with the world trends very closely. We are close to the 50% market share for this vehicle type. And by the way, we are about to unseat hatchbacks as the most popular vehicle class with SUVs. On the other hand, we have seen that as affordability increases, price points have also been creeping up over a period. However, India remains a value market with customers seeking best value and quality at each of the price points. So one has to keep making sure that the content is absolutely perfect, and that's the biggest puzzle for us to crack. And of course, we are getting better at it as time passes. Uh, the way that it is done by us is to make sure that the well engineered parts that we have are carried forward to the next product cycles, whereas the better engineered new technology parts are reverse integrated into the earlier products. So this kind of makes sure that most of our products stay on course to meeting customer demands and requirements. To manage this on the product lines has been a deep exercise in complexity management, including more and more use of JIS, JIT, sourcing higher levels of assembly, etc.
And that's interesting because you're gaining greater value out of those new technologies and components you're mentioning there, back further down the product line. That's quite a challenge to reverse that into your earlier sort of production lines. But really very interesting. I mean, I know with this push towards SUVs, have you adapted some of your manufacturing process and technologies? Have you utilised things from your association or your partnerships with Jaguar Land Rover? If you have, can you offer any examples of platforms or models that you might have shared across there?
Sure. And this cooperation has gone quite deep, actually. I mean, not much of it may be visible outside, but it is really deep. To give an example, the D8 platform that we have used for Harrier and Safari has been a great learning. So we have absorbed and implemented the manufacturing sequence and weld shop practices, for example, at that time. To give a deeper example, we have taken up inline gauging and piercing operation for suspension mounting, and in many ways that has solved many quality problems that would have arisen otherwise. And of course, we continue to benchmark other areas in manufacturing like powertrain, and we are seriously considering leveraging several other opportunities. So this is something that is work in progress, has been work in progress, and we are really gaining out of it.
That's right. That's very interesting. I mean, I think that there's a theme here with the change with the new model launches and then require for updates to compress product lines. We're looking at kind of this sense of complexity in manufacturing. The more things you add, the more complicated it gets. You recently launched CNG powertrains for the Tiago and Tigor models. Does this add further kind of diversity and complexity in manufacturing around the powertrain side?
Oh, yes, of course it does. It does add more operations and more parts to the manufacturing line. But it's also been a saving grace that the CNG powertrains are based off our traditional gasoline ones. And as you would know, one has to provide an extra fuel rail and a place for the fuel to be injected in the intake manifold. And if we want a bi-fuel combination, it means both fuel rails stay active through the use of the car, and the user can decide whether they want to use CNG mode or gasoline mode. On our production lines, of course, there are a few additional operations and a few more parts that we need to handle. But coming out of the gasoline engine production line, it's not too much addition to our complexity. By the way, we do see CNG as a mainstream product variant and have taken steps to ensure it integrates well with our gasoline work streams with as many common facilities and process steps as possible.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, do you have more sort of sub-assemblies around the powertrain to handle like the assembly of those modified manifolds, intake manifolds you were mentioning there? Does that kind of cater for those additional parts with the CNG side of things?
Yeah, something like that. In the sense, on the engine assembly line, there would be additional fuel rail that one has to fix for CNG. And then, of course, on the car, you would have to fit in all the additional fuel lines, the cylinders, and all the safety valves, etc.
Yeah.
On the control side, we have kind of made sure that we use a single ECU to monitor both the CNG and the gasoline systems, by which we are able to achieve a very quick transition from CNG to gasoline and vice versa. So, I mean, you can actually switch between the fuels as you're running. No need to stop and then change. So it all works well for us.
I mean, a big theme, obviously, there's a great deal of complexity across the global manufacturing scene as we see now with the transition to alternative fuel vehicles and manufacturers trying to work with different powertrains and by extension architectures, etc. From Tata's point of view, with a large variety of models and derivatives, have you had to adapt any new operations or manufacturing processes to manage this? Have you looked at, I mean, obviously with certain things are naturally on a sort of modular or flexible, but have you added any more of that sort of side of things into your operations?
Yes, of course. I mean, for example, our engine architecture is a very good thing to demonstrate the modular strategy that we have. The 1.2 liter engine family caters to a large portion of our engine requirements for most of the cars we make in the naturally aspirated and the turbocharged versions across many of our product lines. And we are able to achieve this on a single engine production line by tweaking content and generating different configurations on the assembly line and a little bit on the machine shop side also. Another example is our AMT or automated manual transmission strategy, in which we have chosen a single shift mechanism with ECU that we have been able to adapt on multiple gearboxes, and that gives us the capability of providing AMT utility in many of our products. So that's also working well for us. On the other side, vehicle architectures have been evolving, and every time that we end up making a new platform and a new well line, we kind of make sure that the same well line is able to deliver more than one product for us, and that's how we can manage, let's say, transitional volumes between models or between, let's say, one plant to another. So all that works for us today.
And that kind of leads me nicely into the next question, really. I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, we've talked about this sort of diversity, the need for updating the product lines really quickly, and obviously to give the customers choice. And I think the Indian market is very good example of this. This is kind of key to the success in the market. But have you mentioned there about using one sort of transmission type with componentry and shift systems. Is it an overall objective as well to reduce the complexity and variety where you can in vehicle engineering platforms? And have you got any example? I mean, obviously you just mentioned that example. Have you got any other examples? Because obviously when you're looking at model derivatives, you're looking at trim levels, spec levels, things like that, and that's interior, exterior, and on kind of engine performance. Have you got any other examples of where you try to consolidate that a little bit, or been able to?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you take let's say smaller examples like you mentioned for trims, so in Harrier and Safari you would see a mid pad, but if you sat in the two cars you would never make out that it's the same part. It's been done so well, and it can be delivered in so many variants, and I mean in wood finish or whatever else you want to have, and that kind of makes sure that we can do many things. Same, for example, with the door pads or the seats, and I mean, for example, the ventilated is possible, the leather is possible, and we can have so many other leatherette options that can go with that. So the choice is endless, and the manufacturing systems that we design need to cater to all of this so that we don't miss uh, gaining from the scale that we are able to generate from this.
And that's really interesting because from a work content operation point of view, from your design and production teams at Tata, they must be working absolutely flat out continuously to keep that cycle fresh and to be, as you say, very smart and intuitive in how they're adapting the various trim levels and technologies to suit different vehicles without it, as we see, the platform underneath is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Just moving a bit onto sort of Tata's future strategy, you're working on a project called New Forever. Could you offer a few details on this and how it fits into Tata's future strategy?
Yeah, sure. So, there is a conventional wisdom in auto industry that swears by the model year concept. We found this too restrictive as the pace of change in Indian industry is much higher, and competition from around the world that operates here keeps bringing more and more advanced offerings into India with their own timetables. So we wanted to have a broad strategy that enables us to keep tracking customer sentiment and bringing in bite-sized interventions across aesthetic and feature-led changes. Well, all said and done, the car is a fashion product, and not staying current and vibrant is likely to hurt. And Tata Motors, of course, is on a growth path, and the new forever strategy is one of the cornerstones of growing volumes on the current nameplates. Uh, we appear to be doing all right on this front today. To give an example or two, you could look at the success of hashtag Dark, a range that we have brought across 4 of our SUVs, and Kaziranga similarly. Both of them actually answer needs of individual micro white spaces that took quite some skill to identify and to exploit.
And that brings me into another question here, which is kind of, again, a broader one, really. We talked a little bit earlier about how you've really closed up and tightened up on your supply chains. You have a much more but stronger partnership with those tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, bringing in systems and components. From your point of view, looking globally at the recent disruption caused by pandemic, the COVID pandemic, semiconductor shortages, and now the conflict in Ukraine, we've had these kind of just constant ripples of fairly significant disruption to the automotive industry. How has Tata ensured the resilience of its supply chains and manufacturing operations?
So the pandemic and of course the semiconductor crisis subsequently, plus the conflict in Ukraine, has created havoc for everyone around the world, and it includes auto industry. By the way, we appear to have done slightly better than the industry. Okay. Mainly because maybe over the years we have tried to work to make our supply chain more and more resilient. Some of the things that we have done would include diversifying our supplier base with sourcing that is not affected by the same factors that would apply in a given region. We have tried to go global. We are global as well as local in many ways. We have also tried to work on geopolitical de-risking that has helped us now. Maybe another factor that helps us is that our products are simple, and we continue to work on simplifying our products and on the standardization. On the, let's say, semiconductor side, reducing application-specific ICs and the usage and having simpler products has helped us. And we have worked actually actively on doing this. Having a reliable supply base, including vendors that have good cash positions, adequate staffing, is also working for us. Then aligning the demand and supply within the supply chain is quite good for us. So, for example, there's a process called sales and operations that works between the market side and the operation side. So this is a process that normally people would like to do once in a month and then shut shop and then just deliver. During the pandemic and the crisis, we saw merit in doing this almost on a daily basis. because then, for example, in India, if we saw that a shutdown was not allowing supplies into Cochin, but allowing supplies into Mumbai, so we tried to make cars that were required by customers in Mumbai and ship them there. So that kind of made sure that our production did not have to drop because some market wasn't working, and our cash cycles also did not stop during those times. It has also helped us to have proven capacities at vendors' works. And of course, we have also leaned quite a bit on digital space to provide visibility across the supply chain so that hotspots, if any, are visible early enough. So quite a few things that have helped us to get there actually.
That's a really interesting, very flexible strategy you've adapted there. And is that obviously, as let's say, as things and supply normalizes,
Yeah.
will you still maintain that strategy, you think, or elements of that strategy going forward?
So, I mean, there are some good lessons that have come through. So, for example, if there is a change in, let's say, demand for some product or the other, and something else goes up, I believe the new strategy that has got developed during the pandemic will, be good for us. It will have value. I don't know if we'll still do a daily SNOP, but increased frequency, much more than a monthly one, is surely working for us.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And one last question for you, Mohan. I really appreciate your time. So, one last question for you. Again, looking at the kind of volatility we're looking at here. Tata's, like many, but Tata's operation, sales, marketing depend on relatively stable forecasting to be able to plan these operations that we've been discussing all the way through, which must be a challenge. So in these very difficult times, really, probably unprecedented in the sense of the volatility, how have you adjusted? I mean, you did mention there on the supply chain, but in terms of your forecasting, how have you adjusted the way you manage volume and capacity? You were talking a little bit there about keeping manufacturing levels up.
Yeah.
Have you managed that
Yeah.
from a forecast point of view?
Yeah. So once again, and one could not have forecasted what's happening next week also. Situation was not at all good. So the only way that we could work and things that have worked for us is to have a constant interaction with the sales and marketing teams and having a ear to the ground almost in all the dealerships that we have, so that we know, and of course there was times when even dealerships had to shut shop and people were not allowed to visit dealerships to make purchases. Okay, so then we have worked on the digital domain where digital inquiries have been focused on, and we have tried to contact those customers and make sure that we kind of capture those orders and then make ours to those requirements. So if physical walk-ins haven't worked for us, the digital approach has worked, and like in all other white goods, we have seen prevalence of digital that is, I believe, here to stay, even if the pandemic goes away. And people's habits are moving more and more towards digital shopping and word of mouth rather than physical visits. So we have also tried to make sure that we work on that and have enabled such people to get test drives if they need at their home, at their convenience. And this is something that has made sure that customers stick to us by our being able to meet their requirements, and something that's really helped work for us.
I've got one last question, Mohan. If you just got, this is kind of another forward-looking one. Your vision for sort of enhancing and optimizing the Tata product line and its operations over the next 5 years. What do you hope to? What is your vision for that, or what's Tata's vision for that? And what do you hope to achieve in the next 5 years?
Sure. The obvious steps would be to see progress on ESG and net zero. By the next 5 years, we would of course have a attainable plan for achieving net zero, and would have already moved several steps ahead in that direction. We also see that we need to work on propagating growth of the EV ecosystem, and you would of course know that we are doing quite strongly in the EV space in India, and our EVs are on the way to becoming, let's say, good selling cars in India. On the other side, for the next 5 years, we would also see cars that become more like digital devices. the car would be more connected, it would have more radars, it would be more autonomous, and safety would be very high on everyone's minds by then. It is today also, but it would, I think, gain momentum even more. And safety would not be just during a crash, but also pre-crash, and post-crash. And of course, the emergency response systems that would need to help if a crash does happen. So all those things would be, quite good to achieve in the next 5 years, and will keep us quite busy.
Well, if you're not busy enough already, Mohan, with everything we've discussed today, there's some fascinating insights there into what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what Tata's plans are. Really, really interesting stuff. Thank you very much for your time and joining me today. And we'll catch up again soon, I hope. So I'd just like to say to our audience, thanks for watching this session, and look out for more sessions at the Automotive Evolution Summit. Thanks very much, and goodbye.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, AMS. Great being here.